is my pleasure to welcome back to Facing the Nation after a very long time. We know he's been very, very busy, and you'll be hearing about so much of what he's been doing. He is none other than Attorney General, I should start with, Minister of Legal Affairs and Attorney General, the Honorable Basil Williams. Welcome to Facing the Nation, sir.
Thank you, Malika. It's a pleasure to be back. I didn't realize it was such a long time.
Yes, it was. Viewers, of course, you're used to us splitting the program in two, where we deal with one sect in the first half hour and another sect in the second half. But because Attorney General Williams' sector is such a big one, what we're going to do, we're going to have that conversation. We're going to try to squeeze as much as we possibly can from him today, and then we'll see how things go. But the Attorney General is on this program at a time when there's so much happening in our environment regarding politics and governance in general. And apart from being Attorney General and Minister of Legal Affairs, he is also one of Guyana's veteran politicians. I want to start off on that note. AG, you've been, like I said, and viewers, I can tell you, he's been saying off here how he's a tad, not much, but a tad bit tired. But you've been doing so much lately regarding what is happening with us. The first thing, I want to start with the no confidence motion. It has been ventilated so much in the press. We know what is happening with that. We know where it came from. We know how it came and all of that, and we know where it's at now. Let's talk about your confidence level as a representative of government, obviously, in terms of the fact that we're now heading to higher courts. Your confidence level that the government of Guyana will come out victorious in all of this, before we touch on any other things surrounding it.
Well, I'm a lawyer, and basically we don't want to make such predictions, but
Okay.
you know me over the years.
Yes.
I think I was known as a lawyer before I got involved with this politics thing.
Mm-hmm.
And the courts have to do what they have to do, and we have to do what we have to do. Obviously, I am more convinced about the argument that we have of the validity of the vote, that it should have been 34 at least and not 33. Mm-hmm. And the other arguments that we have leveled, that the resolution is actually subsidiary legislation, mm-hmm. and such subsidiary legislation cannot be in contravention of Section 20 of the Interpretation and General Clauses Act. In other words, it says it cannot be inconsistent with the provisions of any act. Mm-hmm. Of course, the Constitution is an act. It's a schedule to the Cooperative Republic of Guyana Act. And we feel that the resolution, which requires a reduction in the term that is given to a government, a 5-year term given to the government, and the head of the government is the president. And why we say it's a guaranteed 5-year term, only the president could reduce the term, not any other extraneous source of force. So we believe in those arguments. Of course, the Chief Justice has ruled, and we have already filed 2 appeals in the matter. And one of those decisions came in the Ramsey case, where the Chief Justice is saying that from the night of the vote, Cabinet was no longer in existence.
Yes.
And that has its own problems, because the opposition has been saying the government should only have a caretaker role, which would really be to pass legislation for funding of the elections. But I don't know if they realize that if there's no cabinet, then no financial bills cannot be taken to the parliament, because Article 171(2) says that such bills, any recommendation, and such bills must have the recommendation or the signification by cabinet before they could come to the parliament for passage. And of course, if there's no cabinet, then there are no financial bills could go to the parliament for passage, and therefore no funding could be sought for GCOM for the holding of elections. That's a serious consequence of ruling that cabinet doesn't exist.
All right. I'm going to come back to that. In talking about it, I think I lost my point.
Yeah.
But in terms of what is happening now, whereby the Chief Justice has ruled that cabinet can't exist, and of course there's a difference of opinion where that is concerned. How is that linked to the other matter whereby members of parliament, people with dual citizenship, cannot or should not be in Parliament, how is that going to be affected, or how will that affect what you just explained there? Because on both sides of the House, there are members of Parliament who have dual citizenship. How will government, if at all, how can government work around that?
Well, there's nothing to work around. I think the Chief Justice, in that case, Reed's case, which has been done by Mr. McKay, Mr. Boston, and others, in that case, she didn't give many of the declarations that they sought, but she certainly said that anybody who had dual citizenship cannot sit in the Parliament.
But if that, my question basically, if that is so, what happens?
Well, it's a ruling of the court. And as far as I know, we've always been law-abiding, and on a decision made, unless it is set aside, it stands.
It stands.
So, but I believe appeals will be made to challenge the decision.
To also challenge that.
And I suspect the lawyers will be really in the process
because then,
of making
and this is coming directly from some of the public sentiments. The question now would be, are we going to have MPs? I mean, I know you can't speak for opposition, you speak for government, but are we going to have MPs? And, you know, we already know those ministers who have publicly stated that they have dual citizenship. Are we going to be having them resign at this point for other potential members of parliament and potential ministers to take their places? I think that is...
Well, we haven't, as a government, examined that aspect of the ruling of the Chief Justice in the Reed's case. But there are authorities in other jurisdictions that show that when the courts make such rulings, you know, the MPs who are affected, they take certain action. You know, and so that's the question. It's a ruling of the court, and until it's set aside, then that ruling would have to be observed.
All right, let's come back to something else you talked about. You touched on a bit earlier. This whole business about a caretaker government. Does any part of the Constitution speak to a caretaker government? And if it does that apply in any part of the current situation that the AP and UAFC administration is, I don't want to say faced with, but we know the situation?
No, well, that answer is simply no. There are no provisions that provide for that in the Constitution. No caretaker government. And it's amusing that we actually saw, when the advice was sought by the IDB, a response given by the former Attorney General to the Minister of Finance to be sent to the IDB rep in Guyana. And one of the issues that was raised, questions raised and answered by the last government, was that after dissolution, on the principle of continuity, the executive continued with the same powers unaltered, which meant that before dissolution, they would have had that power, full powers, or no caretaker or restrictive existence. And, you know, it's politics on their part as usual. They tend to, on an occasion, assert something when they themselves are affected by it. You know, like in the case of Desmond Morian, Mr. Nandlal filed a prerogative writ instead of an election petition. That matters before the Court of Appeal. That was the case where they were attempting to disqualify Ministers Felix, let's say members of Parliament, Felix and Scott, if you recall.
Yes.
And I went to the court, and I went to the Court of Appeal. And I got an injunction staying the effect of the ruling of the High Court that the ministers should be disqualified. So, you know, you don't really take them seriously in these matters. They're making a lot of noise. They have a campaign on as to suggest that we're bigoted, seeking to appeal to the Court of Appeal or even to the CCJ if necessary. When in fact they do the same thing. I think they sent something to me today purporting to suggest that they're appealing the GCOM case to the court of CCJ, to the CCJ. And yet you hear them arguing as though the Chief Justice's decision is the end of everything and final. But we have a hierarchical court system. If you're dissatisfied, according to the law, with a decision of a judge, you appeal to the High Court or full court, to the Court of Appeal or full court, and if you're dissatisfied there again, you appeal to the final court, the CCJ.
Sir, I want to come on the side of all of that, and you just mentioned GCOM, and it brings me to a point, and I wrote it here because I really didn't want to miss this. Now, recently, as we speak, by the way, viewers, as we speak, and even for those of you who are going to be viewing a rebroadcast, as we speak, I understand there's a press conference by the Guyana Elections Commission, GCOM. So bear in mind, my question is coming before we hear about any final sentiments from GCOM, but I'm going based on what was said earlier in the week. And it said, basically, Mr. Lowenfield indicated that it will be unlikely for GCOM to be ready for general elections before July. Now, given that, sir, what can be expected, also given that the president has announced, he had announced in January that elections will be held when GCOM is ready. How does that affect everything else that's happening, including court cases?
Well, basically, GCOM is an independent authority constituted under the Constitution, and they operate without being subject to the direction of any other person.
Okay.
And only GCOM could conduct elections in Guyana. So the court, and to the credit of the Chief Justice, she has refused to be drawn into any question of foreign or dealing with GCOM.
Okay.
Because everyone recognizes that even if the court says elections should be held next Friday, GCOM has to say whether they can hold elections next Friday or not. And in fact, the president determines an election date upon advice by the chairman of GCOM as the readiness of GCOM. And even if you assume, for example, he got that advice, he fixes a date for the election, and before that date arises, GCOM could indicate to the president that they will not be able to hold election on that date as had been agreed because of certain circumstances arising. And so they could no longer be able to conduct elections on the day and postpone elections. Okay.
All right.
And of course, we have precedent wherein house-to-house registration was required in the 90s, 1990. And there was a state of emergency declared. The Constitution provides for that too. If the president fixes a date for elections, and it arises that the elections cannot be held, it's a state of emergency, it's a crisis. And in that situation, they had an agreement to have the house-to-house done and all these things too. So GCOM really is a real crucial factor in the holding of elections, and therefore they have a duty to ensure that elections are fair and clean. Okay. And to have clean elections, you have to look at the registration process, and you have to purge the lists of dead people and people who are not registered in accordance with the laws governing registration. We had a problem in, I'm just back from Mamaruma.
Yes.
And the comrades have been, assailing me with the problems they had with the gerrymandering of the elections in that town. The question of proxy voting, the question of persons' names being on the list, but they're not living in the registration area in which their names are, and the frantic effort to bring people across from the border to vote, not only there, but in Latam also. So the list is not perfect, but you should also factor in that in budgeting, GCOM had actually budgeted for house-to-house registration in 2019. They recognized that they needed to ensure they had a perfect list, well, almost perfect list. And so they, when they made that determination, obviously wasn't thinking about a no confidence motion.
Exactly.
And therefore, this no confidence motion would cause, them to be hurried into holding an election. But I don't see why they would want to hold an election that could spawn all kinds of problems that we've had in this country.
Yeah.
After every election,
That
accusations like this,
yes.
marches, destruction.
Yes.
I don't know if, we don't learn from past lessons. So we'll have to weigh the situation, and let's hope that good sense prevails.
Okay, all right, great. Fears, if you're now tuning in, my conversation today, of course, no stranger to us, is the Attorney General and Minister of Legal Affairs, the Honorable Basil Williamson. We're talking all things governance, politics, and so on. We still have some more to get to. So, and those of you who've missed it thus far, as usual, I always remind you that the conversation subsequently will be seen on both Facebook pages and YouTube channel. AG, I want to talk about precedence. We've seen a pattern in the last few years, and if I can go as far back as 2010, 2011, we went into, when I say we went into an election mode. The government did not change, however, we saw a minority president. We saw the AFC, of course, that would have been before they collated with APNU. We saw the AFC brought a no confidence motion. Then we had a parliamentary prorogation. Of course, that was a term cut short. Viewers, not that I was sorry about that, not that I'm speaking for the PPP. We all know where my political allegiance lies. Then the APNU, AFC, and now we see, because of, one man's deceit, it seems as though there is a want to cut this government, also cut the term of this government. Now, do you believe that all of this now, including the 34, 33, the 33, 34 argument, the dual citizenship, all of it, are all of these things setting now a precedent for how the parliament should function in the future, if it can be for the better or for the worse? Do you expect drastic changes after all of this?
No, well, we have been having changes. You mentioned 2011, 2015. What happened in 2011? There was this majority parliament for the first time, which was in the opposition, and the government had a minority. There was a minority government with a one-seat difference. That election was significant because it really broke with the tradition of racial and divisive voting in Guyana. And that was confirmed that people were tired of this race voting and race baiting. And in 2015, they showed it. And so they put the APNU AFC in government. And I believe that the efforts are being made to return us to that type of politics, but I think the Guyanese people are very sensible, and the Guyanese people know where they came from. We know that in the 23 years that have been passed, that the wealth wasn't distributed to most people. Most people, and we talk about all Guyanese, except for a small circle. So we weren't surprised that the people rejected the government and its policies. We're only in office for 3.5 years, and I'm sure we could say without any fear of any contradiction that we have actually started to transform Guyana. Wherever you go outside of Guyana, you hear the same thing. People tell you what a difference we're making. And basically, we are not afraid of the elections. I think we have a right to ensure that the no confidence vote was taken validly and in accordance with the Constitution and the other issues raised. That's why we have the court. And in fact, we have come to the court because we had gone to the Speaker, and I had indicated to the Speaker that he had the power to revisit his decision and reverse it. He agreed with me. But he thought that the issues raised were so substantial and largely constitutional that he felt that the arm of the government, the arm of the state rather, that is entrusted with interpreting the Constitution, that is the judiciary, should be seized with the matter. And it's the Speaker of the National Assembly who referred us to the courts. Okay. So I don't know why people are beating up on us or going to the courts to have access to justice. And there's a dangerous thing. We have to look at that because the people who are doing that, they themselves are seeking to use the same path. As I said, Cedric Richardson, that decision, first instance, second, and at the Court of Appeal, it was overturned at the CCJ. The GCOM case is also on the same trajectory. The opposition now is taking the appeal to the CCJ. So what is wrong with us on the advice of the Speaker seeking to have this matter finally determined? And to answer your question, the courts need to finally determine certain issues so as to guide us in the future. And so we're only doing what has been asked of us. And it's the first time we have a no confidence motion actually purportedly executed in the House. And the citizens would want to know, 207,000 persons voted for us. They would want to know how one
person
act of treachery could actually dissolve their votes and truncate the term. So, it's very important that justice is seen to be done, in this matter.
Has any of this, do you believe any of this has affected our image internationally, especially among our CARICOM sister nations? Has it affected our image in any way, or do you believe it's showing that democracy here is strong?
I'm not sure what you mean by our image.
Guyana's image, in terms of, all right, there
No,
were
but
some sentiments that were unstable.
Well, there's a rule in the Constitution that provides a no confidence motion. We might say that we don't find...
Given that this is the second...
Right, the first one wasn't
followed. It didn't go
followed.
through, but we had a parliamentary prorogation. People might say, well, what is going on in
Well,
Guyana?
you're utilizing the provisions of the Constitution. But what is important is that you can't... it's okay for one side to invoke provisions of the Constitution, and when the other side tries to do that, then it's a crime.
Okay.
So it must be a level playing field. And insofar we are pursuing constitutional redress and remedies, I don't think we need to worry about people saying anything.
All right.
Because we know we are following the path of accessing justice that is provided in our system.
All right. Before we deal with some other issues, you talked about the fact that you were at Mabaruma today, and we're going to talk about an anti-corruption sensitization seminar that you're also in a sense promoting currently. But before we even talk about that, you were at the Northwest District earlier in the day. I know, and viewers, I must tell you, he rushed from one region to the next just to get here to be with us on Facing the Nation. What sort of, and as I said, this is my final question regarding what is happening in terms of politics, no confidence motion and all of that. Do you get a sense from the people on the ground, especially the supporters of the government, do you get a sense that, they are confident, they're not worried and in confusion more? So what is the feeling like on the ground, especially in that community?
Well, certainly not in a manner that you described.
Okay.
Let me say to you, that act of treachery was the single most mobilizing event you could find in anywhere.
Okay.
They have our constituency, they're fully mobilized. They're outraged, of course, and really and truly they can't wait to deal with the situation at the ballot box. So they're very confident. They, in fact, wanted to know. I suppose they see me as a source, and I was even invited to go to Mabaruma Radio. We have a radio up there now. Our government had established a radio station there, and they're very upbeat. A lot is happening in Mabaruma, though. I mean, they're having good roads now, concrete roads. Roads are being done all over. They propose to have a boardwalk at Komaka, and many things. They built a market tarmac for the vendors, so they're relocating them and outfitting the tarmac adequately with sanitary facilities and the like. But they know that they are on the verge of a takeoff in those regions, and people are very confident, and they have come out and they express themselves freely, and of course they believe that we should be allowed to continue on the path that we have started these 3.5 years.
The opposition has been in the past accused of going into our, meaning PNC and APNU, AFC, strongholds in our communities and trying to plant themselves there and deceiving the people. Is the government concerned about any of that now? Again, and viewers, I like to remind people that before all of this, elections were constitutionally due by August 2020. So regardless of whenever we're going to have elections, is the government concerned, and are we putting measures in place to ensure that the opposition, does not penetrate and is not able to deceive our people?
Well, look, it's politics. They're doing what they think they should do. Mm-hmm. All I would ask, though, is that they shouldn't try to inflame racial tensions.
Okay.
But if they feel they want to go into any territory that they think that it's their right. And it's for you to defend your territory, so we have to defend our territory.
Okay.
And we have to go to every nook and cranny. People want to see us. That's another thing. People want to see ministers, even though we have all those regional officials. And the regional officials will tell you, they go in all the time, they check with them and so, but they still feel they want to see a minister.
Okay.
And of course, you have a heavy turnout when ministers come in. Mm-hmm. But that's the way things are. It's a big country. Ministers are on the ground all over this country, and we have to deal with it. The elections, you go to all the communities. It's a cut and trust. We feel free. There's no way that we feel that we cannot go in the APNU AFC. Mm-hmm. We'll go anywhere. We go down the quarantine, we go anywhere, Region 3, Region 2. And we feel that the people of this country want to have the good life that we have promised them, that President Granger has promised, that the APNU government has promised. And they're looking forward to the good life. They've already seen the good works.
Okay.
Those good works cannot be denied. I think I said on the East Coast at the meeting that Judas's betrayal of Christ didn't stop the work that Christ had been doing. In fact,
very true.
2018 years later, I would say that Christianity is the largest religious denomination in the world.
Very true.
And equally, people have seen the good works that we have embarked upon, and they would insist that we be allowed to continue to do the good works when they enter that ballot box and cast their vote for the APNU, AFC under President Granger.
All right. A few more matters before we begin to wrap up with the Attorney General, because again, I know he's running on some amount of empty, but he's still sacrificing to be here with us. Tell us some more about, and you have, in your tenure as Attorney General and Minister of Legal Affairs, our country has achieved a lot. Right now, there is the AntiCorruption Sensitization Seminar. Could you shed some light on that?
Well, that is also part and parcel of the AML-CFT, the combating proliferation of weapons of mass destruction regime too. The president really is the one who had initiated everything here. AntiCorruption appointed me to be the point person under the AML-CFT, because the whole thing is to clean the economy of dirty money. Okay. You know what that is, and you know where it came from. Mm-hmm. So one of the first challenges that we had was to ensure that we get rid of all this dirty money, trafficking in persons, trafficking in narcotics, trafficking in arms and ammunition, you name it. And it distorted the economy, created an underground economy that affected legitimate businessmen. Mm-hmm. And it, only those who were in it really profited. Though I don't know how much you could say that they profited, because we would refer to that business as zombie business. Mm-hmm. Because suddenly something happens and they start killing off each other. They start robbing each other. So it's not an easy life. So we believe that we have to make strenuous efforts to stop the leakage of money from the treasury, the people's assets. The forensic audits have shown billions of dollars leaked from the the people's treasury, money that could have gone to do a lot of work in many communities in this country. And even now, a lot of communities still need a lot of amenities and infrastructure and so. So that's why they say there's a direct relationship between corruption and poverty. Because when you cream off the money, it's only you and your family. If you could enjoy that kind of money. And the people are left. No water, no light, no roads, no garbage disposal, no opportunities for the children to have jobs, that kind of thing. And access to education and everything is impaired. So the world is taking a stance against corruption. They actually had a big conference here in Latin America on corruption,
Yes.
Anti-corruption. And they've actually conflated corruption and AML. So it's like there's this conference in Miami that is held annually, and it's AML corruption.
Okay.
Because the same thing, the money that you use from corruption, which would be a predicate offense if you use that money to purchase anything with it.
Right.
Cars, property, whatever.
Yeah, because in essence, it is dirty
So
money.
more or less the same thing,
Okay.
you know.
All right, AG, I know you have much more to do, lots to get to, of course, but before we begin to wrap up our conversation, again, I would like to, and this is your sector, I'd like to give you an opportunity to touch on anything that you may have missed and anything that you want to leave with the public at this time. Viewers, he's everywhere now, and he's going to be everywhere for a very long time until we get all of this sorted. But I'd want to give you an opportunity to say anything that I may have missed and anything you would want to leave with the public at this time.
Malika, basically, time won't permit me to really address these issues.
Exactly.
But I would say, though, that the Attorney General, the role of the Attorney General is not the role that would have been played in the past.
Okay.
Like the role played by Dr. Shabdin, Soshudat Ramphal, and other AGs in the past. Where simply they looked at going to court and taking bills to Parliament.
Okay.
I think that the world community has decided that more responsibility should be placed on attorneys general because of the particular training and everything. And so you find, for example, this global body, FATF, and its regional arms, mostly lawyers, they are entrusted with that function to protect the international financial economy. I remember when I was chairman of CFATF for the year, Madam Gail Teixeira was saying, but you're not an accountant, you're not how you could chair, but she doesn't know it's largely legal frameworks. The recommendations provide for it, and if you don't have those frameworks in place, they blacklist you.
Okay.
And now that we have put the legal frameworks in place, in the fourth round, they're looking to see how effective they are. If we operationalizing them and we work in them, and the results would show how many prosecutions you had, how many the suspicious transaction reports and threshold reports have been sent to the FIU. What the FIU did with those reports, they're the analysts. Have they sent anything to SOCU, the investigative arm, and what has SOCU done? How many money laundering offenses and how many convictions? So they're looking for effectiveness. And a lot of countries who have been examined in the fourth round haven't made it.
Okay.
They haven't made it.
So Guyana should be proud.
No, we coming off assessment in 2022, so we have to keep working on it. We have a lot of things. We have a far way to go. We have to organize the non-professional and professional bodies. And people like accountants and lawyers, they are addressed by the FATF recommendations, these global recommendations. And so they have to be supervised also, And I don't think it's something that lawyers should worry too much about. But in the national risk assessment that was conducted, they are very high risk. They're high risk all over in terms of money laundering and the like. And of course, um, if we fail to do that, we could be again blacklisted. As
So we're not
Trinidad is
necessarily.
having tremendous difficulty with that. And in fact, they found themselves on the EU list. So we were on the EU list taken off. I see they put back again, you know. So there are different blocks are trying to also impose their own rules. A lot has to do with taxation too, tax evasion. So the global body, the world is trying to protect the international financial economy. And that's why you have correspondent banks pulling out from these regions because the risks are too high for them, you know, in terms of the business that they transact. If they are caught in a money laundering trap, must as if you have some terrorists being financed from their banking system, you know, that's a problem.
So basically, these efforts
That's
will
the
have to
problem.
be ongoing. You're not ever completely out of the
You're not
danger
out
zone.
of it at all. Just
Okay.
having been blacklisted in both CFATF and FATF in the third round, and you came out of it, you think that's it. But
Well,
it's a
most
harder
people are
road.
of
It's a
that
harder
opinion,
road
so
for the fourth round.
I'm happy that you're revealing all
Yeah,
of that
so-
now because, you know, like myself, people who, you know, think that, okay, we're out of the danger zone, that's it. But I'm happy that you're
Look.
giving that information.
Those registries have to be organized in a way so that you could access the registries and you find out about the beneficial owners of companies that want to do business, and all company officials must be fit and proper. So everything is pretty streamlined,
Okay.
and the recommendations are very clear. So when they come and they examine you, they know what they're looking for.
Looking for. Okay. Attorney General and Minister of Legal Affairs, it's always a pleasure having you here on Facing the Nation. We look forward to having you back soon as, you know, we continue to deal with matters of your sector and so many other matters. Viewers, I remind you that he's not only Attorney General and Minister of Legal Affairs, but he's also one of Guyana's political veterans, an executive member of the People's National Congress Reform. This has been a conversation with him, obviously. If you've missed it, if you're now joining the conversation, remember subsequently you can catch this chat on my YouTube channel and Facebook pages. It will also be on the Attorney General's Facebook page, just so you can get all of the information that he has been able to give me today. Sir, thank you so very much for being on
Well,
Facing the
thank
Nation.
you, Malika. It's
All right.
nice being back on this program. We used to really work it, and I believe we should continue to.
I'm happy that you remember that, sir. Thank
Yes.
you for that. Viewers, we'll take a quick break. On the other side of the break, I have a clip that some of you are excited to see, those of you who have not yet seen it. So we'll take a quick break, and on the other side of the break, I'll introduce that clip. Stay tuned. This is Facing the Nation. On air, you know, because like I know the matters in court, and I, you know,